Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. Amusement parks have this strange quality where everything is designed to feel safe and fun. But the second you look past the surface, past the lights and the music and the crowds, there's a whole infrastructure behind it that most people never see. These are 4 true stories from people who saw a little too much. The first story was sent in by a listener who visited a small, run-down amusement park in Pennsylvania near the end of the season. He calls it the maintenance path behind the fun house. What he found in a photograph afterward is the kind of detail that keeps you up at night. The funhouse mirror showed someone standing behind me, but when I turned around, the corridor was empty. I stood there for a good 10 seconds, waiting for my eyes to adjust, but there was no one. Just the warped reflections and the tinny carnival music looping from a speaker somewhere in the ceiling. This was at a place called Storybook Gardens, a small amusement park about 40 minutes outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was late September, one of those end-of-season weekends where the park stays open but barely anyone shows up. My girlfriend and I had gone mostly as a joke. The rides were old, the paint was peeling, half the food stands were shuttered, but we liked that kind of thing. The fun house was near the back of the park, sandwiched between a shut-down bumper car pavilion and a maintenance building with a rusted padlock on the door. We went in separately because the entrance was only wide enough for one person at a time. I went first. The first 2 rooms were fine. Spinning tunnel, strobe lights, the usual. But in the mirror room, the 3rd room, I noticed something odd. One of the mirrors wasn't mounted to the wall. It was freestanding, angled slightly toward a dark gap in the corner. Behind it, I could see what looked like a narrow path, maybe 3 feet wide, leading into darkness. Not part of the attraction. There were no lights, no decorations, just raw plywood and electrical conduit. I almost kept walking, but then I heard what sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from that gap. I figured it was a park employee, maybe someone doing maintenance. I leaned in slightly and said hello. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Nothing, so I moved on. When I came out the other side of the fun house, my girlfriend wasn't behind me. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Then I went back to the entrance and asked the kid working the door if she'd gone in. He said no one had entered after me. I called her. She picked up on the 2nd ring and said she'd gotten distracted by a text and wandered toward the restrooms. She was fine. We laughed about it, but here's what I can't stop thinking about. When I got home that night, I was scrolling through the photos I'd taken at the park. I had one picture of the mirror room, just a quick snap, and in the freestanding mirror, in the reflection, there's a shape in that dark gap. It's not clear, it's not obvious, but it's there. It looks like a person crouching, just inside the opening watching. I zoomed in. You can see what looks like the top of a head, and 2 points of light where eyes might be. I showed it to my girlfriend. She said it was probably a mannequin or a prop, and maybe she's right, but props don't take steps. And I keep thinking about those 10 minutes she wasn't behind me, and that gap in the wall, and how easy it would have been for someone to step out of it. That feeling of realizing someone was there, in a space you thought was empty, that never really goes away. The next story is from a man who was working at a beachside amusement park in Alabama. He stayed late after closing one night and saw something he wasn't supposed to see. He calls this one the wrong operator on the Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel started moving again at 11:45, a full hour after the park had closed. I know because I checked my phone the second the gondola lurched. Let me back up. I was 19, working a summer job at Gulf Shores Fun Park in Alabama. It was a beachside park, nothing fancy. A handful of flat rides, a log flume, a Ferris wheel that overlooked the Gulf. I worked the ticket booth near the main gate. My shift ended at 10, But that night I stayed late because my ride wasn't coming until midnight. I was sitting on a bench near the Ferris wheel, earbuds in, when the lights on the wheel flickered on. Then the motor kicked in, that low grinding hum. I pulled my earbuds out and looked around. The midway was empty. The game booths were tarped. Every ride had been shut down and locked out by the closing crew, and I'd watched most of them leave through the employee gate an hour ago. I walked toward the operator's booth, the little plexiglass box where the ride attendant sits, and someone was in it. I could see a silhouette through the scratched plastic, sitting in the chair, hands on the console. I knocked on the side of the booth and said, "Hey." The figure didn't move. The wheel was turning slowly, the gondolas swinging gently as they passed the top. The colored lights reflected off the wet asphalt from an earlier rain. Everything else was silent. I came around to the front of the booth and opened the door. The chair was empty. I'm not saying the person vanished. I'm saying by the time I got to the front, no one was sitting there, but the console was active. The key was turned. The speed dial was set to 2. Someone had started the ride. I reached for the emergency stop button, and that's when I heard the gondola, not the mechanical creak of the wheel turning. A banging, rhythmic, coming from one of the enclosed gondolas near the top. Bang, 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 like someone hitting the inside of the door with their fist. I hit the stop. The wheel groaned and slowed. The banging continued. Then it stopped when the gondola reached about the 7 o'clock position, maybe 40 feet up. I stood there staring at it. The gondola was rocking slightly. The door was closed. I didn't open it. I called my manager. He came back 20 minutes later with a security guard. They brought the gondola down and opened it. Empty. No sign anyone had been inside, but the safety bar had been lowered, like someone had pulled it down from the seated position. My manager said it was probably the wind and an electrical short. The security guard didn't say anything. He just locked the booth and told me to go wait by the gate. I transferred to a different park the following week, not because of what happened that night. At least that's what I told myself, but I never sat near that Ferris wheel again. And I learned later from another employee that a kid had died on that ride in 2004. He'd climbed into a gondola after hours, and the wheel started moving on its own. They said it was a malfunction. They said a lot of things. I don't know what I believe, but I know someone was sitting in that booth, and I know the safety bar was down. Some things at amusement parks are designed to be watched. Photo booths, ride cameras, security feeds. But what happens when the photos start showing things that didn't happen, or at least things you don't remember happening? This next story is called The Season Pass Photo That Changed. And honestly, this one unsettled me more than most. When I picked up my season pass from the kiosk, the photo on it wasn't the one they'd taken of me. It was close, same angle, same background, same lighting, but the expression on my face was wrong. In the photo they took, I was smiling. In the one on the card, I wasn't. My mouth was slightly open, and my eyes were looking to the left, like something off camera had caught my attention. This was at Cedar Hill Family Park in southern Ohio, a mid-sized park that's been around since the 80s. I'd bought the pass online and went to the Welcome Center on opening day to get the physical card. They took my picture against a blue screen, printed the card in about 2 minutes, and handed it to me in a little lanyard sleeve. I didn't look at it closely until I was in line for the first coaster. That's when I noticed the face. I went back to the Welcome Center and showed them. The girl behind the counter said it looked fine to her. I said the expression was different. She shrugged and said sometimes the camera catches a weird frame. She offered to retake it, but the system flagged my pass as already activated, and she said I'd have to come back another day. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Over the next few weeks, I visited the park maybe 5 or 6 times. Each time I scanned my pass at the gate, the photo on the screen matched the one on my card. Wrong expression, mouth open, eyes left, but no one ever said anything about it. Then in late June, I noticed the photo had changed again. The face was still mine, but now the background was different. It wasn't the blue screen anymore. It looked like a section of the park. Trees, a fence, maybe the backside of one of the ride structures, and the face was slightly blurrier, like it had been taken from farther away. I went to guest services. They pulled up my account and said the photo on file matched my card. I asked them to show me the original image. They turned the monitor toward me, and the photo on their screen was different from the one on my card. On their screen, I was smiling against a blue background. Normal. On my card, I was standing somewhere in the park, unsmiling, looking at something I don't remember seeing. They said it might be a printing error. They gave me a new card. The new card had the correct photo, but the next time I visited, about a week later, I scanned the new card and glanced at the screen. The photo had changed again. This time it was taken from even farther away. I was standing near the wooden roller coaster, facing away from the camera. You could barely tell it was me, but it was. I recognized my jacket. The thing that made me stop going was the last photo. I scanned my card on July 9th. The photo on the screen showed me sitting on a bench near the back of the park, an area near the service road where most guests don't go. I was looking directly at the camera, not a park camera, not a ride photo camera. This was taken from maybe 15 feet away, at eye level, like someone had been standing in front of me. I have never sat on that bench. I've never been in that part of the park. I canceled the pass that afternoon. They asked why, and I said I was moving. I wasn't moving. I just didn't want my face in their system anymore. Sometimes I think about who took that last photo, because someone had to be holding the camera, and whoever it was, they were close enough to see my face clearly, which means I should have been able to see theirs. This last story is the one that disturbed me the most when I read it. It was sent in by a former ride operator, and it involves a head count that didn't add up. He calls it the kid who was already on the ride. I'll let him tell it. I counted the kids before the ride started. There were 11. When the ride stopped, there were 12. I was 23, working ride operations at a park I'm not going to name. It was a family coaster, nothing intense. 4 cars, 3 rows each, max capacity 12. My job was to check lap bars, do a head count, and send the train. Simple. That afternoon, a birthday group came through. 11 kids, 2 adults. The adults didn't want to ride, so they waited at the exit. I loaded the 11 kids, did my count, and confirmed with the other operator on the platform. 11. The ride is about 90 seconds. A couple of small drops, a helix, and it comes back to the station. When the train returned, I walked along the cars to release the lap bars. I counted 12 kids. I stopped at the last row. There were 3 kids in it. There should have been 2. The third kid was sitting on the outside seat, hands folded in his lap, not moving. He was wearing a striped shirt and khaki shorts. He looked about 8 or 9. I asked the 2 kids next to him if he was with their group. They looked at him, then at me, and one of them said he was already sitting there when they got on. That's not possible. I loaded every row myself. I asked the boy directly, "What's your name? Where are your parents?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, not scared, not confused, just still. His eyes were locked on mine, and his expression didn't change. I radioed my supervisor. While I waited, I released the other kids and let them exit to the adults. The boy stayed in his seat. He didn't try to get up. He didn't look around. He just sat there. My supervisor arrived a few minutes later. I pointed to the last row. She walked over, looked, and asked me what I was talking about. I said the boy. She said there was no one there. I looked. The seat was empty. The lap bar was still in the locked position, pressed down as if someone was sitting under it, but the seat was empty. I told her what had happened. She checked the ride camera footage. The footage showed 11 kids loading. The footage showed the train completing the circuit. The footage showed me walking along the cars at the end. And in the footage, the last row had 2 kids in it, not 3. At no point was there a third child. But here's the thing. In the footage, you can see me stop at the last row. You can see me lean down and move my mouth like I'm talking to someone. And you can see the 2 kids in that row look to their right, toward the empty outside seat, and react. One of them leans away from it. The other one nods. They were looking at something. I was talking to something. I quit the next day. Before I left, I asked one of the senior operators if anything like that had ever happened before. She didn't answer right away. Then she said that about 10 years ago, a child had died at the park. Not on that ride, on a different one that had since been removed. She said sometimes the other operators would report a count discrepancy on the family coaster. Always one extra, always in the last row. She said they stopped counting. I think about that kid's face. The way he looked at me. Not like he was lost. Not like he wanted help. He looked at me like he knew I could see him. And he was waiting to find out what I would do about it. I didn't do anything. I just left. And I wonder sometimes if he's still sitting there in the last row, waiting for someone else to count wrong. That's all for tonight. If you have a true scary story you'd like to share, you can send it to me. Stay safe out there.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.